And we are live. Welcome everyone to Social Selling Hour, episode number 30. Episode number 30, our second to last one of 2014 on this December 15th. Couldn't be happy to be here. Happy to have everybody joining us on the Twitters using hashtag SShour, as well as my co-host, the wonderful Rachel Miller. How are you, Rachel?
I'm fantastic. Happy Monday, everyone.
All right, and so we're excited to talk probably one of my favorite topics of all, personal branding, importance of being yourselves. We couldn't have had a better guest to talk that, the sales guy himself. Jim Keenan, welcome to SShour.
What's up, folks? Glad to be here, ready to break it down.
All right, so give us a little background about yourself. Those of you, I think most people know who you are. If you read any of your blogs, you definitely are someone to remember because I think you keep it real better than just about anyone out there. So give us a little background about yourself, and then we'll jump into question one.
Background, that's a big question. What do you want to know? When I was a little kid getting out of trouble using sales, or how I grew the company? That's a big question, my man.
So where did your personal brand start? I guess it's when you were born, right? I guess that's the idea, where who you were started back then. But give us a little background about what you do, what your day-to-day looks like. What are some of the things that you kind of help your customers or clients with on a regular basis?
Yeah, so I mean, simply put, we do all things sales. So a sales guy has two divisions: the consulting division, which helps companies grow their sales, improve sales, turn their sales teams around, and then the recruiting division, where we help companies find good sales talent. So we're just submerged in sales all day long. It's nothing sold, nothing happens till something gets sold. We live and breathe that.
Awesome. Well, that makes 100% sense. So I think we'll jump into question one here, and I know the questions are kind of just the framing side. So we'll, those of us that are joining on Twitter, feel free to chime in, answer the questions as always. The links are out there to watch this on YouTube as well as on the Google Plus Hangout. And those of you that are watching this on replay, still use the hashtag SSHour. We will be tracking getting that. So question one, investing in your personal brand. Why is it important? Why is it more important than investing in kind of your sales pitch? How do you feel that personal brand investment plays in today's sales environment?
To me, it's real simple, right? Because there is more information around, people really don't give a shit much about anything than knowledge and information. So if you don't have a brand that's centered around some level of expertise, some level of knowledge, some level of a solution that you can bring value to somebody else, you really don't have any value, right? You're on your heels the whole time. I hate to say it, but it's why do I care, right? Who are you and why do I care? Long time ago, it was really hard to create that. You couldn't promote it. You couldn't demonstrate it. What did people do a long time ago? They created books. That was really the only way to do it back then. I'll write a book. Well, that was a big effort, right? Now you don't need that. You can build a brand and disseminate it in a million different ways. And so you got to have it. I mean, you know that.
So yeah, one of the things for me, I always like to say, like the resume was the hardest thing because it was a dead piece of paper that really just had static information on it, right? There was no dynamic element, and when you're building that, you're trying to even establish that initial relationship. It's extremely hard to do that with just a piece of paper being your your spokesperson, especially people like yourself, where you're passionate, you have your vibe. So when you think about that personal branding and you think of the sales pitch, how can someone build their personal brand that helps them grow their, improve their sales pitch as well? Because I think the two of them in today's world, that first impression really is happening in the digital space more so than in the face-to-face space.
Well, I think the first thing I want to say is take the pitch out of it. The idea of a pitch has got to go. Pitch it. Pitch the pitch, I always say, right? The bottom line is that when you talk about resumes still do and used to talk about what we did, right? They don't tell you anything about what we know, and they really only correlate to what we can do, but they only correlate. They're really not the cause. So even with just a resume, it didn't really tell you very much. And again, notice I started this whole thing. It's about knowledge. What do you know? What do you know in your head? What do you know how to do? How can you execute? What value can you bring? How do you impact other people's lives? If you can't build that up and articulate that in a fashion that somebody just following you on Twitter or somebody reading your blog or somebody following you on Facebook can't figure out on their own, then you're not doing it right. That is the pitch.
So salespeople have a wealth of situational knowledge, but they're not sure where to start with this whole personal branding thing. They have their LinkedIn page, so where do you suggest that people, like, what's step one? So I want to build my personal brand. I know I'm smart. I know I'm good. I'm in the game. What do I do?
Most people aren't going to like this because it's a lot of work. You got to start disseminating the knowledge. You've got to actually take what you know and put it somewhere for others to access. So LinkedIn's done a really good job because they have this whole LinkedIn profile thing, right? What do they call it now? It's not pages. What are the blog things you can do on LinkedIn now? What do they call
publisher?
it? Thank you. LinkedIn is a publisher now. So if you want to just publish, I don't know, twice a month, a really cool article on how to close a deal, how to get a hold of a client that's gone dark, how to exceed quota. I don't care. You create it, but do it twice a month. You have to at least have a place for people to go to find what you know, read it, and attach it to you. And if you can't do that, then this idea of branding around just a Twitter page and, against Twitter and retweeting, it's not going to do it. You're going to connect with people, but there's just really no way for them to know what you know. And that's the key. You've got to disseminate your knowledge.
So that's interesting, knowing what you know. I like that idea. And I always think, when we talk about content creation, we were talking about it last episode where, too many people are creating content for content's sake, not content to provide value, content to help, content. And when the reason I like your blogs is there's no fluff. You call it like it is, you present the information, the data, and then you kind of give them something actionable to that. How did you kind of get over that hurdle of like kind of that, as soon as content became king, people just started creating content for God knows what reason. How do you kind of handle that situation? Because the content you create, I think you can take an action from that immediately. And I think that's something that our community could really, learn from.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. I'm all feeling good inside. Okay, this is going to sound funny, but it's because I am a true salesperson. Okay? So really, I don't want to sound like an ass, and people aren't going to like what I'm about to say, but look at me, folks. Most of you aren't salespeople, and you can't sell for shit. Okay? And that's the honest to God truth. And if you like it, I'm sorry, but listen to me and you can change it. Here's why. When I started writing my blog, like a good salesperson, I asked myself, how can I help the reader? What is the reader going to get from this? What is the state the reader is when they're reading this? They are an individual contributor who can't make quota. They are a manager who's having a hard time building his team. They are a CEO who's looking to build a strategy. I don't care. I started with them and said, what can I give them to make their life easier? And when you start from that, you can't do anything but create the content I create. But what most people do is they think about them. What do I have? What do I want to do? What do I want to tell you? Me, 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 me. And you'll create content for content's sake that nobody wants to read.
Do you think people are struggling because they're withholding? They're not, like, you give it away. And I think that's why people love reading your blogs. But a lot of people, I think, they're trying to keep that little nugget, the actual actionable tip for themselves. You think that's the roadblock for a lot of salespeople?
I guess, but why? Unless you're trying to be, even if you're a consultant, I think that's silly. But if you're trying to build a brand as a salesperson who then is easier to hire, is in more demand from recruiters, is more demand from your customers, and you're trying to increase your demand, what's the point of holding the nugget? The nugget is what makes you look like a genius. I know we have time, but can I tell a quick story? Have you guys ever heard this story about the Westinghouse GE consultant?
No, go for it.
So I'll make it quick. And I'm sure I'm getting the names all messed up, but the point won't be lost. There was a Westinghouse little genius back in the 1900s, early 1900s, who understood AC/DC, and GE was having a hard time with it. So they called him up and said, yeah, it'll be $10,000. So he goes out, he meets with the consultants, he meets with the engineers, he takes a look at their problem, he spends about a half hour looking at it, he messes around and says, here's your problem. He says, you want to do this, 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 and this. And exactly what they were looking for, fixed it, solved this big problem they couldn't solve. He bills them, and finance sends back and says, listen, we really appreciate what you did, but we're confused. It's $10,000, and you're only here for a half hour. And he said, yes, the $1,000 was for the half hour. The $9,000 was for knowing what to do.
Nice.
Yeah, I like that. That's truth. That's the truth. And I'm a big fan. Jay Bear, to Rachel's point, we always say, like, if you're giving away some of this content for free and you're afraid someone's going to take that and implement them themselves, they're not the type of client you want in the first place, and they probably weren't going to buy something. So they're wasting your time people to begin with. So you'd almost eliminate or get rid of those people that are going to waste your time. So giving away that knowledge and kind of providing that value up front almost buys you, more quality leads and more quality relationships in the future to begin with. And I think that's a powerful element there.
Well, let me take it one more step for you. There's some psychological craziness going on with this too. It's not so straightforward. If you drop some mad wisdom, right, and someone's like, wow, I never thought about that, or that was really good, or that's impressive, it also leaves them wondering, I wonder what else he or she knows that I don't know. Right? Because really smart people are rarely one-hit wonders, right? No one thinks, wow, that was really good on Keenan, but I'm sure he doesn't know another damn thing. Right? So, yes, let it all out.
No, I agree. I think that's something that the salespeople that I respect are doing that, and I think it's a proven method for them. Mm-hmm. So which is a good lead into question 2, actually. So first impressions are very important. I know you talk about that a lot on your blog. So how can salespeople effectively showcase value in that first meeting? So whether it is someone reading your blog post or you're talking with them on the phone, how do they really show their A game up front?
I think when it comes to A game, what works for me when I'm talking to a candidate or even a CEO or a head of sales and I'm sizing them up, I think the greatest assessment is, do they understand the world and context at which they're playing? In other words, how well do they grasp the content, the industry, the environment, the setting that they're playing in? And so if you want to really get a good impression, you've got to be able to demonstrate you know what you're talking about. You got to demonstrate that you understand the world at which you're playing, which then dictates how you operate in that. Does that make sense? If I have a bad assessment of what the world of complex selling looks like and I'm unable to articulate the complexities and why it's complex and what connects to what and what the alignments are, anything I suggest after that's going to be a miss. Right? I mean, like a really good cook, they understand the chemical makeup of the food and how they blend together. An average cook just says, oh, carrots and peas, sounds good to me. A really good cook understands the fundamental context of why they blend. And that's what I think is important. You got to understand the context. You got to know that.
And I think
that's a hard thing to grasp, though. I mean, you can't just drop terminology and a few acronyms and expect people to believe that you know what you're talking about.
You can do it through questions. And you can do it through restating the context or the theme. So if it's a face-to-face conversation, you listen to them and you can say back to them, okay, based on what I've just heard you say, or are you aware? This is one of my favorites. Someone's talking, they're sharing a problem. I was like, oh, are you aware that when you do this, you can expect this, and this to happen. Most people anticipate this, and this is why they expect it. But they're missing the fact that, do you see what I'm saying? I've just dropped wisdom or a contextual element that they weren't grasping. Back to the cheesy analogy of the chef. Hey, peas and carrots were great. Well, most people think they do because, but did you know, or were you aware, that when, you mix peas and carrots, it creates this type of chemical reaction, which really isn't all that good at the end of the day. So a better suggestion is, I know it's a cheesy analogy, but you're picking up what I'm putting down.
For sure. No, and I think part of it goes to that is if someone doesn't know how to tell their own story, they sure as hell aren't going to be able to tell the story of your customer, the client, the industry. So, when we're talking about dynamic, you're creating that personal brand and that first impression, if you don't invest and don't know the story that you're telling, you don't know your voice, why the hell is your customer going to waste the time letting you try to help them with their voice or help them solve a problem? So I love that, and I like the cooking analogy mainly because you're looking at the same exact thing just from a different view and having a different, your own say. I think that's, our theme today in this talk was really, being yourself, why personal branding matters and why standing out matters. And part of it is if 10 cooks come in a row and 9 of them just look at it and say carrots and peas, the one who stands out and actually presents a story that actually is memorable and actually provides additional value, bam, they're the ones that are going to get that gig to begin with.
Dude, you just said it, and this is what people miss. My voice whether it's physical, whether it's this interview, whether it's on Twitter, whether it's on my blog, is simply a vehicle. That's all it is. People confuse brand with being the message. Brand is the vehicle, right? It's how it's delivered. But what is being delivered? I can build a quote unquote a brand around a 2-cent toy made in China, but that doesn't necessarily align with who I'm trying to sell it to, what the point is. So when it comes to individual branding, if you're not branding around a powerful knowledge base, you're branding nothing.
Well, especially because those that can't do that, usually they don't have anything to brand in the first place, right? I've always found that's the biggest part. It's like, hey, if you can't figure out your own brand, you probably have been, pulling wool over the eyes and been, living in this non-transparent thing. That's why transparency scares the hell out of a lot of people, because a lot of people don't have much to back on in the first place. They like the illusion. They like that, miss. And that's partially why, when we're talking personal branding, that's why I was excited to have you on as a guest, is, personal branding has transformed my life, transformed my career, and mainly when it transformed for me is when I stopped focusing on what I thought other people wanted to hear, and when I started focusing on just being myself and sharing my own insights. And it's amazing how simple that sounds. And I think you've kind of hit that on multiple elements, because these people that are spending so much time thinking about strategy and all these other things forget about the whole point of they're falling and want to engage you or want to hire you or want to buy what you're selling because of you, not because you're telling them what they want to hear.
It's not from telling what I want to hear. What I love about brand is, and it's really good in America, because the United States, we're a little entitled, right? It's about me, the me country, right? I'm sure some people are going to have a problem with that, but they'll get over it. It's the me country. So just play into that. So when most people think of a brand, they think of, what do I get from that brand? Porsche. They're not thinking about anything other than what I get if I buy a Porsche. Tide laundry detergent. What do I get when I buy Tide laundry detergent? So what I think, like when it comes to an individual brand, I want to say the same thing. When you say Brian or Jim or Rachel and it's branded, you want them thinking, what do I get from Brian? What do I get from Jim that works for me? I don't care about Jim. What can Jim give me? And if you can get that so it's powerful, and they think they get a lot, you got a successful brand.
Oops, I was on mute. No, I think you made compelling points, and your peas and carrots analogy is blowing up on Twitter. It's really resonating with everybody who's watching.
Actually, one of the words on Vidar, one of our previous guests, Vidar on Twitter, put out there, make sure your expertise is accessible to your target audience. Don't save your insights for paying customers. That's a pretty good way of saying it, because I think that's probably one of the lesson learned in personal branding is people I don't want to give away the keys to the kingdom. Well, no one's going to pay for the keys to the kingdom if you're not willing to provide some value up front. I think that's a big piece there. And so when we get into question 3 here, we're talking about omni-channel communication, making omni-channel makes being a thought leader achievable. And I believe that. I've been living that. I've been very lucky and blessed to have some things work in my favor. But what's your favorite social channel for maybe communication, and what's maybe your favorite one for closing the sale or maybe taking the sale to the next level?
So I look at social, I think differently than others, or maybe I'm just so full of shit, but I look at it in 2 ways. You have to have a repository, and I talked about this before. I believe very, very, very firmly that you have to have a repository for your information, whether it's a blog, whether it's LinkedIn Publisher, Facebook. I don't really care, but it has to be a single place that someone can constantly or continually go to read what you want to share. Okay, or videos. It could be YouTube videos. Again, you have to have a repository. So from a repository perspective, my favorite is a WordPress blog. But you know what? It can be Publisher. And shoot, my daughter is a huge makeup tutorial fan, and I forget this girl's name, Michelle Fawn, I think her name is, and she has millions of views, and her brand is Facebook. Her repository is Facebook. Is YouTube, and you can go to see her video, her makeup tutorials, and this woman gets millions of views, right? So number 1, you need a repository. My favorites is WordPress, although I've also used YouTube. Then after that, it's the sharing or dissemination. How do I take that repository and spread it out, right? Create that hub or move it. And my favorite in that one is Twitter. So, and then LinkedIn too. You would think it'd be LinkedIn, and maybe I need to spend more time on it, but I like the speed at Twitter. I like the fact that I can do it over and over. I like that. I think it's shared more on Twitter, and it usually ends up in LinkedIn anyways by going through Twitter. So I prefer Twitter. But where I'm going with this is I think anybody who's trying to figure out how to move or communicate their information, look at it in those two ways. I have a repository, and then I have a disseminator. And you got to use them both together and know how you're using them.
Yeah, I love that you're putting so much emphasis on a repository or a home. We've had several people from tools like Metal and Scoop It on Social Cellular, and they talk about that. Like, just sending out random tweets on Twitter is great, but you need to bring people back to your home eventually if you want them to convert and keep coming back. So I think that's great. And yeah, but for people who don't have a WordPress blog, Publisher has been a fantastic alternative, and especially getting in front of thousands of people. I mean, I've had a lot of my posts just spread like wildfire, much further than they would on my personal blog. So
yeah, I know some people who've actually abandoned their personal blog. Maybe I'm usually pretty progressive, but maybe I'm being old school here. But I've got so much juice built up on it, and I'm not writing twice anymore. But yes, I've heard good things about Publisher.
Well, and I think part of this new world, and I think it's when we start, and I think maybe this is 2015, where we get people to stop creating content for content's sake, and they start creating great content, and then they start upcycling that, and they're putting it on their personal blog, they're syndicating it to LinkedIn Publisher, they're creating an infographic and throwing it on Pinterest, and it's just taking that one great piece of content and getting it out to your community, rather than creating 10 pieces of half-assed crap content and trying to spread that out. I think the key now is going to be we switch this, and part of it's becoming a media hub. So we're lucky to have guests like yourself want to come out and get your story out on this chat, because you have a live Twitter chat. We're talking on Google Plus right now. It gets set up. It sits on YouTube afterwards. We do a post recap of the event after this event. So I mean, that's 5 pieces of content for 1 hour of your time. I think that's really where this idea of using these omni-channels for your advantage, I think, is hopefully where the future goes, and we get people to stop creating all this useless content.
Yeah, yes. The answer is yes, yes. What I'd like to say to people, though, is for the average person, because this is how, look, there's the you, there's the Rachels, there's the me. Look, we're going to be your 1%ers, right? But the average guy or girl who's out there trying to build a career, don't compare yourself to us. You don't need to build this mountain of content, right? Find a way to write 1 or 2 blog posts or written content on Publisher or your company's blog or somewhere a month. 1 or 2 a month. It's 1 or 2 every other week. But keep doing it and share it with your friends and get good topics, because at the end of the day, for someone like the average person, really the goal or objective should be to simply elevate themselves from all the other saps that are in their selling space, right? That's who they're competing with. The next time they go for a job, or the next time they're trying to get a promotion, there's 10 or 15 other people that want the same one, or maybe hundreds. And if they have if I do 2 a month, that's 24 blog posts on topics that interviewer will probably ask me about. Hey, how do you overcome objections from a client? How do you manage a sales team when they seem to be down? Oh, I wrote a blog post about that, right? You have that. So don't try to build this giant library of stuff. Just slowly do it, couple a month, share it, do a video once in a while, and that stuff will start to build up, and people start to know who you are, they'll start to follow you, and when you need it, it will be there.
Yeah, I love that you're preaching that, because I think people feel really pressured to pump out a post every day, and it's crap. And I think the pendulum is swinging back more towards long-form content, and a buffer sets a very high standard for that. But there's been a lot of articles about LinkedIn Publisher, and the articles that are most read are the longer formats with graphs and images and data that's sourced from other places. So yeah, if you do 1 or 2 of those a month, way more powerful than your 500-word shitty post.
All right, so let's jump into question 4. So standing out from the crowd is important, and and I think That's pretty obvious. But for that standard person, I think part of it comes down to, okay, if I can blog twice a month, that's great. I'm going to try to provide value. But what are some of the tactics or things that people can do to really stand out from the crowd? Because like you said, when they're interviewing, someone's going to be reading their blog post, but also they want to be memorable not only in that interview, but pre-interview, post-interview. What are some of your tactics that you know of or that have worked for you?
I have two answers, Ryan, and one of them is going to bore you.
I doubt that.
I'll go with the boring one first. And it's worked for me. It's hard, but it's worked for me. And it goes all the way back to the beginning, so it's going to feel redundant. Know more than everybody else. So if you can't do it all and swallow the whole apple, look for a problem or a challenge or something really unique that you know a lot of people are struggling with. So to give you an example, I wrote a blog post the other day on why, I forget the title, but something about why salespeople are screwing up the demo and managers don't know or something like that. And I broke down how salespeople are completely missing the importance of tying the demo to a specific business problem their customer is having. And how when you do that, you lose the customer doesn't follow, it's harder to sell, et cetera, et cetera. Well, demos are huge right now, right? I mean, SaaS space, et cetera, just more and more demos are being done inside sales. That blog post went through the freaking roof. #1 blog post I've written in 5 years. I mean, it just blew up, right? So the reason it did, and the reason I stick out is because I tackled a very interesting topic that was sensitive, and I did it in a way that other people weren't thinking or were thinking couldn't articulate, etc. So bring more knowledge to the table and attack something that other people don't know. Just know, even if it's one sliver at a time, attack stuff most people are struggling with, and that will make you stick out. Oh, I learned that from Rachel. Oh, I got to come back to them. Okay, and the second one is creativity. Be creative. I don't care how you want to be creative. In your writing style, in your graphical elements, just be creative. Don't write like you're writing for your college business professor. Just be creative. Step out of your box and attack the message differently. So those are two. Be creative and know stuff other people don't know, and you'll be memorable.
I think that's a great point. Be creative, but a lot of people, I think, struggle. It comes down to transparency. They're not willing to show their true personality online. I mean, do you have any tips for helping people get over that hurdle?
I feel like I sound like a broken record because you know what I'm going to say. This is how you do it. The smarter you are, the more knowledgeable you are, and the more you know than everybody else, the more irreverent you can be. You don't have to conform. Right? I mean, if Stephen Hawking only knew as much as the average physicist, the fact that he has Parkinson's would have pretty much prevented him from a job anywhere. Right? But the fact that he has Parkinson's is irrelevant and nobody cares because the guy is so far above everybody else. Right? I stopped wearing suits and I dropped the F-bomb and I act the way I act because if you don't like it, too bad. I know more than you. And I don't care.
That's a great point. I love that because part about being yourself and part about embracing who you are is that you became confident enough to know you can back it up in other areas as well. So I guess my question for you is, where do we have people that say, and I deal with employee advocacy a lot, and they say my employer's not blah 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 blah, and my answer back is do it your damn self, right? Like flip the curve. You have to be your own, invest in your own personal brand. But where does someone find the time to be always smarter? How do you consume content or knowledge? What's some of your tricks in that area that you can be ahead of the game? Because one of the things, like the product demo one, I used to laugh how many times someone would pitch me how wonderful a tool was, and then they have to bring in 4 more people to demo me the tool because they have no idea how to use the tool. And I was like, well, I'm glad that you believe in it, but I don't trust you anymore because you can't even use the tool yourself. Mm-hmm. How do you find that time to invest in that training and that constant upkeep, that knowledge gain to stay ahead of the game?
I would argue, how do you not find the time, right? So one of my favorite blog posts, it's not the busiest or not the most popular, but it's one of my personal favorites. It's about deliberate learning. If you don't know what you don't know, you're a clown. So every day you should ask yourself, man, what don't I know? What am I missing? What could I learn? How could I be better? And then I say, great, I'm going to make it a goal this quarter to learn this. And so I go buy a book, and I go read blogs, or I call up a mentor. I don't freaking care how you do it. Deliberate learning.
That has got to be my biggest pet peeve with salespeople right now. They don't have that mindset of continual learning, which is something you just have to do in this social world. And yes, you can't, like Brian mentioned, you can't blame your employer. You can't say you're too busy because you're investing in yourself, and it's only going to benefit you in the long run.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and it comes back to that area where, like, it's that I feel like I keep picking on Best Buy in like every show I do now, but like when you go into Best Buy, 9 times out of 10 I end up helping the entire group of customers because I know more than the Best Buy employee, right? And so like I don't blame that Best Buy employee for the, but it's like, hey, management, incentivize them to go learn everything about that Apple tool so they will provide value. And, and this even goes into the element of, if you're not going to provide value, give me Wi-Fi in your store so that I can shop for myself. And, because I think part of this comes down to you have to provide value to the customer. And that's why I love your stance on that, because it's providing value, solving their problems. But it goes back to, Rachel's the perfect example. If a company invests in a chief listener and they invest in the idea of listening, you'll know what those problems are. Because, what are your thoughts on, like, a lot of sales guys, I like to believe they think they know what the problem is. They're too afraid to ask, and they don't listen.
I think salespeople are way too egotistical. Sort of, I like to stir the pot. Sort of like this whole cop argument we got today about all this cop brutality in Ferguson and Staten Island and all that. But I'm not even going to get into the race debate. But if you try to tell me we don't think we got a cop problem in this country, regardless of race, you just got your head up your ass. Why? Ever since I was a kid, we always argued, who wants to be a cop? There's two people that want to be a cop. The kid who had an attitude and just wanted to be a bully, right, and wanted control, or the person who genuinely wanted to help people. But 8 out of 10 of it always seemed like the bully was the one who wanted to be the cop, right? So there's this whole personality thing going on with why people do certain things. Well, with salespeople, I think salespeople are a bit full of themselves. There's a lot of ego. There's a lot of ex-athletes who think they're the bomb and all that. And so they get in and they start seeing success, and they just think they're great, and they see no real reason whatsoever to improve. I see it everywhere I go. They just, if I hear I've been doing this for years and I know coming out of one more salesperson's mouth, I'm going to just throw up on myself. I'm tired. Oh, yeah, I know. I've done that. I've been there. I did it. No. Here's what I tell people. It's not what you know, but how you do it. Oh, yeah, I know complex sales is important. Oh, yeah, I can do it. No. How do you do it? Because that's where you win or lose. And 9 out of 10 people, the way you're doing it is average at best.
So do you believe, is the incentivized program that sales a lot of has a little bit to blame in that ego? I worked in a couple of environments, and I was proud that when I met somebody, they said they came from our biggest competitor and we stole them away. Well, then all of a sudden they came to our company and they didn't do any work because they were already we already put them on a pedestal because we had to steal and pay them 10 times what they deserved, and then we kind of brought them in. So how do we fix that incentivized element of the sales game so that people that are actually doing the work that can provide the value and back up what they're talking get rewarded, while we don't make these other ones kind of feel so high in money they don't even want to listen?
I personally, in my company, you don't get a brand in my company. You earn a brand. So we just adopted a phrase here that says complete flexibility with ruthless accountability. Right? So other than that, it's personal. Individuals will make the choices for themselves. This is when we look to hire people, either on our recruiting side for our customers or for ourselves. One of the things we try to find is the person's story. We don't want to know, tell me about your 10 years experience, tell me about how many years you made quota. We ask those questions because there's a certain check boxes we want to get, but we get those out of the way as quickly as possible, and we dig for their story. The reason we want to know their story is really successful people are almost always successful in other areas besides just their job. Really successful people are constantly learning something. So as a perfect example, with all the things I've done in my life, if someone asked me today, hey Keenan, tell me a little bit something about yourself, I would go with something as simple as, have you read the book Capital in the 21st Century? And the average person will say no. It's this freaking thick. What? And I say, I'm reading it because of all of this discussion and debate on wealth redistribution and the top 1%. I got tired of not understanding what was right or wrong, so I'm reading this 500-page economic book that has freaking X's and N's and equations in it so that I can intelligently understand the problem and formulate my own opinion. When someone tells me that, I'm finding a deliberate learner. I'm finding someone who takes things on their own, right? That's what I look for in other people. I don't care. I don't even care if it's not work-related. Show me you do shit on your own. Show me you have initiative to get stuff done. Tell me about the nonprofit you started. Tell me about the club you started in college. Tell me something besides you worked at Salesforce for 10 years and you made quota every year, because I don't give a damn.
That is actually the perfect segue into the next question, because we're talking about, we ask all of our guests, like, what are your predictions for next year and then the future of business? And there's a lot of talk around the water cooler about the future of business is that people will be consultants, like companies will hire all these freelancers and consultants who will work for multiple companies, and kind of like you're pushing that salespreneur model to the next level. So what do you see for the future of business?
I've heard that too. I suck at predictions, by the way. If I was good at predictions, oof, man, I wouldn't.
Go to Vegas?
I just, knowing everything, all the strengths about me, if I could add predicting on top of that, oh, forget about it. But I've heard that one, and I think I agree in some areas. I think I agree that that is something we'll see with coders. I think it's something that we'll see with graphic designers, certain marketing roles, and maybe to a few business development type roles, but I don't think so as far as sales is concerned. I just believe that the amount of time it takes to develop a relationship, move a sale through a sales process, nobody wants that to be part-time. Right? I think more knowledge-based roles like mine, maybe sales managers, I could maybe see that, but it's just tough. On the sales side, I don't see that as much. What I do see coming is, we're already seeing it, nobody really wants to talk about it, is knowledge. How do I want to say this? I'm not too PC, but I got to be PC on this one. All right, screw it. I don't know how to be PC. If you're stupid, you're going to have less of an opportunity to make it in the society. It's really, the jobs are becoming more and more complex. And so to be a little more PC, I don't mean stupid like you're not intelligent or you're not a genius, but if you are unable to leverage knowledge and have more knowledge to leverage it to solve complex problems for your employers. In other words, you don't need to be told what to do, when to do it, how to do it, what the problem is, and given 4 answers to solve it, but that you can actually come in, assess an environment, assess it for what's going on, identify possible solutions, recommend one of those solutions, and then execute against those. If you can't do that in your seat, there'll be less and less and less opportunities for you. This whole idea of a scripted environment where you show up and you just do your job and here are the rules, they're going away. And that's why all these non-employed people are dropping out of the system. They don't know how to do it. That's not what they were brought into. We were brought into a hierarchy of a world that says, you're a secretary, here's your job description, and do it this way. And I don't have time for that anymore. No one has time for that.
That's interesting because I've said it before. Like I've always said, fire all the smart people and hire the ones that are passionate and determined. Because I believe that Google can teach us a lot of shit. So if someone's quote unquote smart, they're smart because they're determined. They don't settle. Failure doesn't scare them because you're not willing to settle for failure. Therefore, it's just a step towards success.
Mm-hmm.
It's that element of that. I think you're onto something because in today's culture, if you have a Swiss Army knife of skills and you're willing to solve the problem, it doesn't matter what you need to do to solve that problem.
Yes.
That's the guy we want to hire today, not the guy that says, I learned something in book in my thesis class. Well, what does that, how does that work for me today? And I can probably Google that and have a more up-to-date answer than your thesis did, 10 years ago to begin with.
Yes. As a CEO of a company, I love it when one of my employees says, Jim, you know when we were talking about this and we were struggling, well, I had this idea, and I think if we do this, this, and this, we can solve that problem. And I'm like, oh, yes! One less thing I have to think about. And so imagine a really big company, right, with multiple layers. The leaders can't think of everything. We can't tell you what the problem is we want solved. We'll do our best, but at the end of the day, companies will gravitate to those people who can actually identify a good problem, understand its impact on the organization, craft a solution, and then execute to solve it. And if you can't do that, no one cares. Or they're going to care less and less.
So I have a question for both of you. In general, do you think people are getting smarter or dumber? Just to play off what you mentioned earlier, Jim.
Really? You got dumber? Dumber?
Really? I mean, when I look at what my 4-year-old's doing compared to what I was doing when I was 4, it seems like we're getting smarter, or we're using more of our brain.
Okay, great point. So I think we're passing in the night on the definition of smarter. And I'm leaning more towards Brian's example of dumber. Fire all the smart people and give me people and get stuff done. Look, I graduated from high school. I graduated in the bottom 3%. I think like 2 people had a lower GPA than I did, and it took me 5 years. I mean, I just really didn't give a rat's ass about high school, right? But boy, I knew what to do with the knowledge I had. You know what I'm saying? There were people who had a lot more knowledge in high school than I did, but boy, I knew what to do with what I had. And I think that's where I'm going. It's not enough to know a lot. You got to actually know what to do it. You got to know how to apply it. You got to know how it impacts an organization. You got to know how to leverage it to solve a problem, to move a company, to save a life, to start something, build something. And I think that's where we're starting to see this rift in society. Those people who can build, create, and solve, and those who can't.
And I think you hit. I like that point where you said it's great that you know something, but you have to be able to do something with that, right? And I think when we talk about smarter, I think our speed to innovation is going to increase because we're smarter to know what we don't know and find those people. I just wrote a blog post about that. It's like it's not what you don't know. All these people focus on all of these elements, and you create a team full of yes men. Well, your knowledge, your total knowledge in that circle is very small. There you go. I like that ringtone.
Sorry.
No, you're good. But I mean, I think when we think about it, there, if we collectively collaborate with people that have the skills that we don't, we're gonna be smarter. We're gonna innovate faster. We're gonna work better as a team. And the ones that are smarter see that and understand they don't know everything. The people that are too dumb to realize that are going to sit out there on their own, believe they're too good for everybody, and they're going to watch us run them over because that power of we. So when I think of smarter, like my almost 5-year-old can use an iPad and actually teaches my mom how to use the iPad better than my mom can use it. Mm-hmm. But I think part of that is because my daughter just does it. I think we're in that society now where we have to be willing to adapt, learn on our own, and do whatever it takes to get the job done.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I have 3 daughters.
Me too. I have 3 daughters.
Hey, welcome to the club, baby. All right.
Man, I just have 1.
I said we have all daughters. We have all daughters on this panel.
That's awesome. And I have a 9-year-old, a 7-year-old, and a 4-year-old. And my 9-year-old flies around her iPad like nothing. She's got it all. But she still struggles at actually solving complex problems. And it's one of the things we butt heads on. I'm like, babe, figure it out. Don't keep getting up saying, Daddy, I need, Daddy, help, Daddy, help, Daddy, help. No, figure it out. Fail. Try again. Do the numbers. Feel the discomfort. Get frustrated and get through it. Because she's really smart and she has it, but she's still not at that stage where she's comfortable or willing to leverage it, move it around, shift it around, and figure out where it all needs to go.
You know what? I blame the culture that gives a trophy to every person, because we're not okay accepting failure because we give a trophy to every kid. Yeah. And I think that's where that goes wrong. I think we have to allow kids to fail because that's where you end up learning. I like yourself. I was presented in my senior year of high school, and my guidance counselor said, "So what do you want to do?" And I said, "College." And he looked at me and laughed and said, "No college is going to want you with your GPA."
Yeah, that's what my guidance counselor said too. Go back to class. You're wasting my time, dude. Yes.
And I was like, wow, okay, well, all of a sudden, how does that work? And for me, college was a struggle. I barely struggled, got through college. But when I found stuff passionate things that I wanted to work on and problems I wanted to solve, you can't stop me. And I think, being able to fail, being okay with failure. I mean, not getting a job, being laid off, or all of these things are part of life. And if we don't allow our kids to accept some of these failures and we give them a trophy because we all lost, well, no, you didn't practice as hard, you don't deserve a trophy. I think that's where this thing changes. And hopefully we're in a culture, I'm coaching my daughter's, her 5-year-old soccer team, and we were joking about it being like, it's okay we're not keeping score, but not everyone here is perfect and not everyone is the greatest player. Like, be okay, accept your role, and the greater team is really what I think we have to focus on. And, I think one of the things I'm curious from your when I think of the future, I think of 2015, we're going to stop talking about social, we're going to talk about, and the idea is going to be conversations, because it's how do we have conversations with the customers, our employees, our team that we're working with. So when you think about that side, I know you have a recruiting side of the house. I like to think of a millennial as a mindset, not the year someone was born. But when you think about this new generation, digitally connected, what are some tips that you're seeing out there for these people that are, hey, I need a sales guy that does A, B, and C? What are some things that these companies or leaders can look for in this new generation? And I know that's off script, so I'm throwing you a little bit of
No, that's fine. I want to think through it because it's a good question. I'm going to say what triggered me when you said 2015 and you want to go from social to conversations. And maybe, yes, conversation can be interchanged with this, but I think this is a stronger word. Engagement, right? It's just not enough to have a conversation. I believe that we're not having a conversation right now. We are completely engaged. And there's a difference there. And I think whether it's on Twitter or on Facebook or whatever, it's about getting engaged. And the only way you can get engaged is to submerge yourself, or immerse, either one, interchangeable? We'll go with immerse.
Rachel has to help us out on that. I'm not going to know the answer.
So we'll go with immerse, I think. It's immerse yourself in the context of the conversation. Not just your belief system, not just your end personal goal, but what are they thinking? What's the broader context? What are the implications? Where do we want to take this? Can it help? Can it hurt? But being completely present, authentically immersed and engaged in the conversations. And I think that when we're talking social, we're talking moving forward, I think that's where we need to be. I think we're too quick to fly in, drop some off the top cuff, some stupid opinion that we've had forever, didn't give it any thought, drop it in, fly out. When someone responds to it, we come back in and drop our other one, and we just don't take it in. We don't process it. I think we need more intellectual honesty, more processing of information, more acceptance of the thought of new ideas. Look, you don't got to believe a darn thing I say. And I don't care if someone disagrees with me, and I'm going to disagree with you, but if you disagree with me without processing what I just shared with you, go fuck yourself. Because you're not engaged with me, you're not having a conversation, you're waiting to hear what I have to say, and you're going to retort. So I could have talked blah, 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 Brian, and you're going to have an answer.
Yep. No, I always said it, I don't ever know that I know everything or I am 100% confident in my answer unless I know the other side of the coin. But if you're going to argue with me without presenting a use case, an example of data, don't bring it because I will smash you. But I will never say I know everything until I understand and listen to that both sides. I like your example of engagement there because I think sometimes engagement, and I will use the word automation. I like to think automation allows us, if we use it correctly, gives us more time to be more engaged, not the other way around. But too many people use automation to give them an excuse not to engage, right? It's that freaking easy button. They all want, I can use this and I no longer have to have a conversation. No, you use this so that you have more data, so your conversations are more engaged.
Yes.
So I love that. I think one of the things that the Twitter stream has been flying by. I know Rachel's been jumping in there and commenting and questioning a lot of people, but a lot of people were talking about the immediacy of social scaring a lot of people because you really, you can't hide behind very much. And if you do, eventually, especially on Twitter, I mean, by the time my favorite thing about Twitter is the bullies, like we were talking about a little earlier. If you don't like someone that you're following, the unfollow button is there. It's powerful because you eliminate their noise from your view. So I was just curious, when you think about social and that immediacy, how does that change that sales approach? Because now if you want real-time feedback, you don't say that you want it. You go ask and you get it.
I just look at it as a tool. That it's just a tool, and it depends on how you structure it and what you're looking for feedback on, and how you want to engage. But it's a tool like any other tool, and it just depends on how you choose to use it and what your end goal or end means is. So I think too often, too many people don't see these as tools, and they see them as end results. No, they're tools or mediums to get someplace, and it's just like anything else. How are you going to choose to use it to get the feedback or to get someone engaged? Are you going to be a jerk and be on a bully pulpit? Okay, you get what you get. Are you going to use it to engage and to learn new information? Then you get what you get. I mean, it really comes down to that.
So we have some questions for you from the Twitter stream.
And I'm not watching the Twitter stream. That's probably all the better, huh?
So
you watch it at the end.
That's cool. I got it. So Jacob Curtis asks, who do you look like? Who are your role models for sales, and what resources do you read to keep yourself up to date?
Okay, you know what's interesting? I want to hit that as a two-part question. It might throw you off. So the first thing I want to say is because I didn't think you were going to say for sales. So that's my role model for online, and I have to say this person. I mean, he's just an amazing man. One of the very first blogs I started to read, not even in sales, is Fred Wilson. So if any of you follow Fred Wilson with ABC and Union Square Ventures, follow his blog, phenomenal man. He didn't know me from Adam. I reached out to him my first year blogging, was interested at the time in getting into becoming a venture capitalist. He met me in New York. We had dinner together. Didn't know me from Adam, built a good friendship. I mean, he's a giving person, and I admire him. So follow him. As far as sales is concerned, I think there are a couple people I admire, and that you could say my mentors or friends or peers or all of the above. One of them is Anthony Iannarino and the Sales Blog. Anthony and I have a great relationship. He and I go back and forth. We're both follically challenged, but I kick his ass by far.
He was afraid. He posted on our Facebook post that he was afraid you weren't going to bring the passion.
Yeah!
He was a guest of ours on our show previously a couple weeks ago as well. He was awesome.
Yes, so Anthony for sure, great cat. He and I also have built even though we live far away, built a decent personal connection based on a lot of other stuff like what's happening in Ferguson, etc. So great guy. Another one I admire, I'm also close to her, talk to her, but I just admire her work ethic and her ability to break down sales problems. Remember I talked earlier about the importance of context and really knowing what you want to deliver? I think this person does it better than anybody, and that is Jill Conrad. Jill just has an amazing knack at taking all this information she has in her head and that she knows and compartmentalizing it in a way that you just can't help but absorb it. And so I applaud her for that, and I admire her for that, and I'm happy to call her a friend.
Yeah, she's one of my favorites as well. So we have another question from Twitter from our friends at VSnap. And they're asking, what traits and abilities define the modern successful salesperson?
So besides all the stuff I talked about before, deliberate learning, being smarter and more creative than other people, what I'll go with is this. At our recruiting firm, companies give us a list of stuff they want us to recruit for. But regardless of what they tell us, it is in our process and our lifeblood that we cannot recommend a salesperson or present a salesperson that does not score extremely highly in 3 areas. First one is creativity. They got to demonstrate to us that they're super creative, particularly in solving problems. Not paint pretty pictures, I mean that's great too, but they have to be creative problem solvers. They have to be able to look at something and see it differently, display it differently, or solve it differently. So they got to be creative. The second one, they have to be able to have amazing assessment and analysis skills. Okay, if I go into a customer and they have a business problem and I'm not good at analyzing or assessing what's happening, what's going on, what the issues are, who's on one side, who's on the other, how the business is coming together, I mean, I could talk for hours about assessment analysis. I want someone who can look at something where most people see 4 moving parts, they see 6 million, and they know how to move them around and ask the right questions and make it happen, right? And how they connect. And then the third one is unequivocally grit and determination. They just can't quit. They just have to get punched in the face, get back up, or scratch and claw for every inch, they have to be gritty and determined. So they have to have those three things, in my opinion. Without them, I don't care how long they sold, what they've sold, how many times they've made quota, they'll eventually fall.
They have to be scrappy.
Yeah, I used to say when I was hiring a team back in my last thing, one of the things I would always ask is, where do I find on your resume where it says you can roll with the punches? And like, if they could answer that question fairly well, I knew they were ready to go, because like I was sending them, deploying them out, and that's the thing today is you have to be able to roll with the punches, because the only thing we know that's going to happen today or tomorrow is change, right? And we have to be able to do that. I love that. This whole talk has been, in my opinion, one of those things where it brings together so much of what I think we've been learning over these past 30 weeks of this community. That Rachel and I threw this together on a whim, on a 1 week beforehand, decided, hey, we want to put a Twitter chat together for social selling. We decided to kick it off the following Monday. And 30 weeks later, we've had some of the brightest guests and minds on social, on selling, on social business, all come on here because they have the grit, they have the passion, and they want to share and help others, right? We're not paying anybody to be on here. Sorry, that check that you might have thought you were getting wasn't coming, but that
Keenan was right here.
But with that being said, we are honored to have you on here. We have about 2 minutes left. Give people a little bit of information on where they can get a hold of you, what they can read you at, where's your blog. I know we'll share out the links as we go, but kind of give us some information, make sure these guys get some more information from you moving forward.
Yeah, it's simple. If you just go to asalesguy.com and scroll down, that's my blog, but up in the top right-hand side, you can find a link to the recruiting division if you want help or want to learn more about how we help recruit, or the consulting division. It'll take you to our consulting page. It also takes you, this is a good one, about giving back. Go check out asalesguyu.com. It has got mad amounts of ebooks, videos, tools, much of them ours, but also other people's. So if you're looking for a central place to go learn, be a deliberate learner, there you have it, a Sales Guy U. But you can find it all at a central hub at salesguy.com.
Awesome. We couldn't be more thankful to have you on. Next week will be our last week of our last episode of 2014. So Rachel and I are going to actually bring it with just the two of us, going to share some insights, some quotes that we've learned over these past couple weeks, or I'd say 30 weeks with all these awesome guests. We'll also preview 2015, each one of our shows. We're going to do monthly themes. So the month of January is Influencer Month, so each one of our guests will be talking how influence affects and plays in the social selling game. And
I know you got Coca for that, right? I know you got Coca for that.
Oh, Coca's a big fan of the community. He's in there. You'll see him a little bit of everywhere. We have some of the team from Tracker. We have some of the influencer tools as well, getting in there with some of the Twitterland and Metal and a lot of the tools that a lot of our community uses. So we couldn't be more thankful, Jim, for joining us today. Thank you to everyone on Twitter. We will get with these notifications. I see that number 99 bouncing on my Twitter notifications, so I know it's a good chat. We trended on Twitter last week, which was by far our first time doing that, which was a kind of a feather in the cap. And then to get back-to-back Jims. Thank you again. Thank you, everybody on Twitter. We will see you next week, same time, 4 p.m. Eastern Time on Google Plus as well as the Twitters. Thanks all.
Peace out.